Hi, welcome back to Daily Dose of Rust. My name is Henry, and today we will be making a tutorial on part 3 on how to use macros in Rust. Now, we've done the first video and then the second video in this series with lots of examples that you can check out, and I will just link it in the description, the part 1 and the part 2 of this video. And then in the previous video, we took a look at how to generate multiple functions dynamically by just writing a very simple code in Rust. In this tutorial, we're going to go deeper on how to generate a struct, multiple structs on the fly with Rust. And each struct we are going to generate automatically will automatically have all the setters and getters set to them using macro. So we don't have to do that manually, and that is the power of macro. And also each of the structs will have an associated function called new that anyone can use to generate a new instance of that struct. Okay, just like we do with strings. Make sure you stay tuned as we explore this. You're going to see the challenges we will have and how we are going to solve them. So let's get started.
Now look at what we want to target. What we want to do is to be able to have a macro that will call something like create struct. Okay, and then when we call it, let's say we want it to generate a struct for us that is called product. And then in here we can then pass the fields and their types, and automatically this struct will be generated for us. So we don't need to create the struct ourselves, just like in the previous video when we did that with the function. So you should check out that video as well, as I explained in detail how to simplify the process of generating multiple functions with macros. Now let's say for products we want to be able to say title, and then we say it's going to be a string. Let's just say ID going to be of type U32, and then SKU will be a string, and then maybe the URL of the product will also be a string, something like this. By doing this, we would have generated a struct. So what we can do is to come in here and then create the struct. Okay, I've explained this in the first part of this tutorial. This is the part 3, how you define a declarative macro. So the first thing we do is to make this macro exportable. Use this macro export. Now if you don't do this, you won't even be able to use this even in this file. Then we use macro rules to define the name of the macro, and we'll call it create struct. Okay, so in here we'll just call it create struct. Okay, so now we have this macro available, and you can see that it's no longer highlighting it as an error here. If you removed this, it's no longer going to recognize it. Okay, so this is very important even if you are in the same file. And then we've created this macro. All we have to do is to provide the pattern and then write the body of the struct in here. Okay, and this is the pattern in fact. So we have to write a pattern in Rust that will match this code that is provided inside here. Let's start with this first one. This will be an identifier, right? I've explained what designators are. Okay, there are many of them in Rust. One of them is identifiers. So check out this video, the first video we did in this series, to understand that. So in the product, we have to say, let's say we call it struct name, and it's going to be an identifier. And then after that, you're expecting opening and closing braces. So that is what we expect next here. And then inside there, we are going to expect a field, a colon, and then a type. The same thing for this one, the same thing for this one, the same thing for this one. So they will be repeating. This is exactly the same thing as this, exactly the same thing as this, with a comma at the end. So using the repetition operator as we've used regularly in the first video and then in the second video in this series. This is the repetition operator. Okay, and then we say inside here we will have a field, a colon, and then a value, and then a comma. So let's just call that field name, and it's going to be an identifier as well. Remember, an identifier is a valid name to a field, a variable, a struct, or whatever. Okay, and then after that we will have a colon, this colon that will exist in each of them, and then after that we have a type. Rust has a designator. Let's just call it field type. and Rust has a designator called type, so we call it ty. So we're saying this will repeat many times, and then after that we will have a comma, and then this could appear 0 or more times. Okay, we've explained this as well. If you know regular expression, you will know what this does. It means all this stuff right here by the left can repeat 0 or more times. So this will cover all these fields that we're going to pass here, and then their types. So once we've got that, we've gotten our pattern. Now all we have to do is to generate the struct. We want to generate the struct itself, and then we implement an associated function that will call new, which will construct this. It's a common practice in Rust, like the string.new, like the string. When you do string new, this is an associated function that generates a string for us. So we're going to create that for every struct that we create using this macro, and then we will create getters and setters for each of these fields that are passed, right? So let's get started. The first thing you do when you create a struct is to say struct, okay, and then you give it a name. The name here will be the struct name, which is what we are going to get here. Then after that, you open and opening and closing braces. Now we also want this to, you also want to be able to print this to the terminal. So we will quickly implement the debug thread for each of these structs. Okay, we use the drive macro, so this way implement the debug thread. Now next, we have to define the fields. As you know, the fields will be passed in here, the field name and the type. So all we have to do is to come in here, and then using the repetition operator again, we can now say define the field name, okay, and then colon, and then field type, and then we say this will be followed by a comma, and then it could occur 1 or more times. Perfect. So now we have a struct, but we have to implement an associated function that will allow us to create an instance of this. So but now, as you can see here, Rust is warning us no rules expected the token this, and this might be very confusing, especially if you're a beginner. So pay attention here in order to understand this. This comma, from experience, will only detect when this comma is between the repeating values. So if you have an ID and the comma is between here and you have another one, then it will recognize this comma, right? But if at the end you have a comma right here, this will not match it. It's not going to recognize it. Let me show you. If you only have an ID here, okay, without a comma, that will be fine. But if you have a comma now and you don't have another field, it will start warning you again, because this comma right here will not match this. Okay, it's not going to match unless you have other fields, another field, and it will match the one in between. Okay, like if you remove this, it's either you remove this, okay, and that will be fine. Okay, and so it will match only the commas between subsequent fields. But once you add another comma here, it's no longer going to match it. So you have to come in here, okay, and then indicate using this repetition operator again that you might have 0 or more commas as well here, and then that will be fine. So it's either you remove this, okay, and then come in here and make sure you remove this. But of course, something like this is a valid Rust syntax. At the end of the last field in Rust, you can have a trailing comma. So in order to preserve this behavior, I suggest you add another trailing comma, the possibility for another trailing comma right here. Okay, and that will be fine. So you do it inside here before the closing curly braces. So we are good. Now we have our pattern taken care of, and we've defined our struct using the number we'll pass here. Next, let's define the associated function that will allow us to create this. It should look something like this. We implement for this struct that we'll call struct name. Okay, so in here we can now create the associated function that we will call new, which is going to accept a few parameters. Of course, we will need all these parameters here, but of course they are repeating, so we can indicate that we are expecting some repeating values here, and there will also be field names, okay, and then a colon. The type will be field type. So here
this function will return an instance of this class, so we can use self there, and then inside here we can even use self here again if we want, and then return the value. But we are going to return an instance of this, so what we can do here is we will assign all the fields, but it's going to repeat. So we say this will repeat 0 or more times, so we'll call this field name, and this will also repeat 0 or more times, because in this case, since we have id tied to SKU, we're going to pass all the values. Okay, so this makes sense. Now we have a struct and we have an associated function that will allow us to create it. Now let's try it out before we start building in the getters and setters. Let's say we want a new product. You can say product 1, and then we'll go ahead and then create a new product. So this product will now be available for us now, and then in here we can now start providing the values. So let's just provide the values, and there we'll have it, a struct. An instance of this struct called product1 will have an id, a title, an SKU, and a URL. Now this is where the beauty of Rust macro comes in. We can come in here and then generate another struct by using this macro that we've just created here. And then all we'll have to do is to pass a name. Let's say we want a user, and then a user will have an id which will be of type u32, and then a name which will be a string. Very fast, we now have another struct. We can also go ahead and create another struct. So this is the beauty of macros. It allows us to generate as many values as possible. And in fact, let's create the getters and setters for each of these. Okay, what we can do is to come inside this implementation and then define the getters and setters. Now, since you're going to have many fields in this struct, we will also have many getters and setters. Let's talk about the getters for now. So we know that they are going to repeat according to the values we have, according to the fields we have. So we have this, and it's going to repeat how many times? It's going to repeat 0 or more times. There won't be any comma. Now we can come in here and then create the method. The method will be the field name. Now remember that in Rust you can use the same name for a field and then a method. Rust will know when you use the method and when you use the field. Okay, that will be the name of the function, and then we make it a method by using this, by letting it accept the self as the first parameter, and then we want it to return field type, and then inside here we'll get to return the values. So what we can do here is to say self dot the field it needs to return, and that also means we will also be returning this by reference. And then remember when we treated lifetime in Rust, just check out this video here because it's very, very important. You see that we explored the 3 rules Rust uses in identifying what lifetime to assign when you are calling a function or a method with parameters. Okay, for example, in this case, the lifetime of these values that are returning will have to be the same lifetime as the struct itself. Okay, it's as if you have something like this, a lifetime called a right here, and then that you are automatically assigning that lifetime to this, and that you're automatically assigning that lifetime to this, right? And you're also saying that the self itself is going to live as long as that. Okay, but Rust will do this automatically for you. If once you understand those 3 rules we explained in that video, you understand that Rust will do this automatically for you, since we are in a method and we have just one parameters there. So okay, so we are good. Let's try this getter over here to see if it's going to work. So we have a product. We can then say something like a URL is equal to something. We can say URL will be equal to product1, and then we say dot URL. You can see that Rust is even suggesting that for us. We can now use the method. So it's recognizing the getters, the method. And let's print that to the terminal to see what it's going to look like. And then let's run the code. There we have it, URL is equal to this. So our getter is valid. Now let's also create a setter. Okay, so we can come in here and do the same thing. We need a setter for all the fields, so we use the repetition operator again, and then indicate that we're going to have 0 or more of these setters. Okay, now so what we have to do here is to create a function with the same name. Okay, and I'm going to show you why we will get an error here soon. So it will accept self, okay, which will make it a method, but we'll also want it to accept the value that we want to set, which will be of the same type, field type, right? We're not going to return anything here. Okay, so we want to access self, and then we want to set the field to the value. Okay, but since we want to be able to modify self, we have to make this a mutable reference. Okay, now see what is going on here. It is give us this error which says duplicate definition. The next option I had was to prepend this with set underscore, but of course Rust doesn't really understand this, right? Because this is no longer a valid Rust syntax. So if you're using Rust nightly, okay, you can run this code, cargo rust c, and then double hyphen and then hyphen and capital Z, and then you say trace macros, and then when you run the code, the Rust compiler will expand the macros for you. And this is what our macro looks like. This is the struct, the product struct that we created, okay, and then these are the fields right here: ID, title, of type string, SKU, URL, and then this is the implementation block. It's not going to format it, but you get the idea. Now here we have all the getters. You can see fn new right here. This new is the associated function that accepts all these values: ID, title, SKU, string, and then returns itself. And this is where we create the value that we returned, and this is the end of the function. Then we have another function called ID, which is a method and the getter in here. It accepts self, and then right here you start seeing the setters and what we are trying to do here. For example, you see this function set ID, but there is a space here, so you can see that this cannot formulate a valid method, so this method will not work. And then I did a lot of digging for more than 30 minutes, searching all over the place, and then I came even asking ChatGPT for a lot of questions. I couldn't figure it out. Kept on giving me a lot of suggestions, including enclosing this and curly braces, but that did not work as well. And then I stumbled upon this crate right here. Okay, it's called the paste crate, and I found out from this question right here that someone asked, and this answer suggested the use of this paste crate. So that is how I got here, but it works for only nightly. This is how you use the code, and it looks like this crate is made exactly for our situation, because you can see here you have inside this implementation block, all you have to do is to wrap your code inside this paste macro, and then when we are defining our method, we can then enclose this identifier and the meta variable inside square brackets and then angle brackets before we have the rest of the definition. So let's try it out. The first thing we need to do is to install this crate. Now, since this paste crate is a library, we're not going to run cargo install on it. We just have to add it as a dependency, and else we take care of the rest. So inside here in our cargo.toml file, we'll go under the dependencies, and then we say paste equal to, and the current version is this. So let's just use version 1. So okay, and there you have it. So we can now come back here and use that crate. You can then say use from the paste module, we import paste, and then do something like this: block brackets and then angle bracket inside, and then we can define what we want to define. Block bracket and then angle bracket, and then a little bit of space there, and then we'll have to wrap the whole implementation block inside this paste macro. Then we'll move down here. And now that we've done that, let's see what it's going to generate. So down here we see that this is exactly what we got. Let's see if it's going to work. And then up here, let's try to set the URL again. You can just access this product. Let's make it mutable, and then we say product1 dot set URL changed.com, something like that, and then we'll print that to the terminal again. Let's print it before here and then after here. I can just read it directly, then delete that one, do the same thing here. You can see that the URL was this before, and then right here it also changed. Okay, the only issue is that the roster analyzer is having issues understanding this paste crate and what it does, and therefore is highlighting some of these. Now with a little bit of digging, you can find out how to fix this, right? But the idea of the video is to shine a light on how you can do this. So with the ability, so with macro, we're able to generate as many structs as you want easily by just doing this. You can generate another one, you can generate another one, and each of the structs you are generating, you automatically have these fields, and also have the getters and setters, and also have an associated function called new that will help construct each of these, the instance of each of these structs. So that makes sense, and you find out, and you also saw that we are able to use this paste macro to concatenate an identifier and the meta variable, because as of now it looks like you can't do that, you can't just do that in Rust. Okay, so I hope this helps you out a lot, this part 3 of this series where we looked at macros in Rust. Now all this while we've been looking at declarative macros. In the next video we'll start looking at procedural macros and others and what you can achieve with them. So make sure you like the video and subscribe, as that helps us out a lot, so that you get notified also when we release new videos.